Now, let's start with Project mBridge. We've talked about Project mBridge for over a year now. It's a cross-border payment system that uses central bank digital currencies to trade back and forth with one another outside the purview of the SWIFT system. And I find it interesting that the first two trades that they did, call it test trades, were done between China and the United Arab Emirates using digital yuan to purchase gold and oil from the UAE. And I would argue that gold and oil have been remonetized globally, that they are far more valuable than the currencies that are used to purchase them. It's kind of like Iran awarding China a very large contract to remodernize their largest airport, and they're paying for it in oil. It's no different than China buying corn and soybeans in digital yuan through Brazil, who then takes those yuan, sends them back to China, and immediately converts it into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Gold and oil are taking a different role. Anyways, the four participants that have stood behind or developed Project mBridge are China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates, backed by the Bank of International Settlements. Oops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to knock that. The same bank that has changed their viewpoint on gold and whether the dynamics have it as a tier one asset or a high quality liquid asset. They look at it very, very, very differently.
Did you know China is quietly stockpiling massive amounts of gold, flying under the radar of global reporting systems? According to Andy Schectman, China could have up to 40,000 metric tons of gold, far more than they're admitting publicly. Meanwhile, as the US sits on a mountain of debt, China is leveraging its vast gold reserves, natural resources, and key global partnerships to build a more resilient economic foundation. By bypassing the US dollar through cross-border payments using the digital yuan, we could be witnessing the beginning of the yuan, surpassing the dollar as the dominant global currency.
I think that all governments, regardless of who they are, choose the path of inflation. It's an easier path than one of austerity. It's an easier path because it keeps the masses at bay until it gets to the point of diminishing returns. So, it doesn't surprise me. It's something that I think you'll find over and over and over again in every culture throughout all of time. Same thing is happening here, but in the end, yes, it may not be the best thing for the Chinese economy, but look, I think that this is something that the Chinese economy is one that is maybe have its own set of problems, but the level of asset base that they have, the relationships that they're striking all around the world in natural resources, to me, will allow them to weather the storm far greater than the United States, who is sitting upon a mountain of debt and a diminished asset base. And the majority of the assets that are still in the West are being slowly siphoned away by countries like China. So, yes, it's another piece of the puzzle. But honestly, Mario, it's not one that gets me too concerned ultimately for where China is going, because I think the bottom of their base, the bottom of their financial pyramid, is far more stable than people give credit for. Mario, when the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, accumulates metal, they don't have to tell the IMF. When they're accumulating metal through a proxy bank on behalf of the PBOC, buying directly from the refineries in South Africa or Switzerland, they're not reporting to the IMF. When they're buying gold that is under 995 pure, it's not being reported to the IMF. We saw Saudi Arabia the other day try and hide their acquisition. China has been hiding it all along. They produce between 300 and 500 metric tons a year. We never talk about that. My whole career, everyone always said China's numbers are ridiculous, that they stayed at around 1,200 tons for years. Didn't reflect any of the increase, whether it be in domestic mining production or any import numbers. And they want us to believe, just because of a couple of months of them supposedly stopping reporting, which was nonsense, because the import-export numbers that were in London painted a different picture. But all I'm simply saying is that I would err on Alistair McLeod's side. You're right, to your point, he says that they have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40,000 metric tons, 18 to 20 by the people, 18 to 20 plus by the state. And I would agree with that. And I did an interview recently with Sean Kuhn of Dolly Varden Silver, and he had confirmed what I had heard from other mining execs, that China, which is, I don't think a lot of people even know, the second largest producer of silver in the world, are flying around all around Latin America, buying up doré and concentrate. And for folks who don't know what doré is, it's a crudely refined bar that's maybe 60, 70% at best refined. The miners will refine it to that level and then send it into the refining company to further purify it. But China's flying around paying an exceedingly high premium to what the West will, buying the concentrate, which is like a sludge, and buying the doré bar at a much higher price in the West, shipping it back to China and having it refined, which again masks the amount that they're buying. It's not purchased off of an exchange. And so they're going to great levels, I think, to accumulate and produce and not tell the world just how much gold that they have. And if you realize that there's a high probability that down the road, gold will be part of a new system, it will be pegged in some degree, whether it be the unit settlement currency or just the very plain fact that the IMF and the BIS look at gold differently than they once did. I think gold has a role in where it's going. It wouldn't be to anyone's advantage to let, hey, this is how much we really have, any more so than, the Fed or the US government auditing Fort Knox and being open and forthright about it, as it's been shot down a few times when Ron Paul tried to have it audited, and it hasn't been audited since 53. And I would ask the question, where did Saddam Hussein's gold go? Where did Gaddafi's gold go? And where did the 12 billion in gold that the Ukraine sold to fund their war, where did that go? Do we have it? So there's a lot of opaque coverings, if you will, over the metals market. And I don't think it changes anytime soon, but I would simply say that China has far, far, far more than they report. And I think that is for sure. I think it's a really massive deal. Before I do that, I would like to kind of, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to kind of draw a narrative and see if it makes sense. One of the things that I've talked about with you before over the years is how things unfolded back in the day. Well, in fact, you know what? Let's just skip that because I don't want to go down that road. But let me just simply say this, that yes, I believe it will have a significant effect. Let's go back to a meeting in Johannesburg, in St. Petersburg, that coincided with the G7 meeting. Let's start there. This was just a few months or a few weeks ago, really, a month and a half ago, the G7 meeting that was in Italy. The Royal Crown Prince was invited to the G7 meeting of Saudi Arabia, that is. He was invited to the G7 meeting and he turned it down. He said, no, thank you, I have other obligations. But then he sent his finance ministers to the meeting in Novigrad. And a few things came out of that meeting that I take particular note of. Now, one of the reasons that I have been saying for almost 4 years that they would issue a commodity-backed currency. Now, it's not a BRICS currency, as everyone originally thought. Everyone thought it would be a BRICS currency, but that's not what it's going to be. It's a settlement currency. But anyways, one of the reasons that I said that was because of a man named Sergei Glaziev, who for 4 years has been talking about this is the ultimate pathway for the BRICS, a currency that will be pegged to a basket of commodities and pegged to a basket of currencies. And so that's kind of been my driving force. I've followed him very closely. So out of this meeting in St. Petersburg, a couple things came out that are very noteworthy. Number one, we understand that 59 countries have formally applied. I don't know how many are going to show up or how many of them are going to be admitted, but I can tell you that 59 formally applied. That is what we were told by Dilma Rousseff. Dilma Rousseff is the former president of Brazil. Dilma Rousseff is the head of the BRICS New Development Bank. This is no small fry. Dilma came out and said that she had 2 meetings on the sidelines at the BRICS meeting in Novigrad with Sergei Glaziev and Vladimir Putin, and that in principle they have agreed to a new settlement currency called the unit, which will be traded over Project mBridge. Now, let's start with Project mBridge. We've talked about Project mBridge for over a year now. It's a cross-border payment system that uses central bank digital currencies to trade back and forth with one another outside the purview of the SWIFT system. And I find it interesting that the first 2 trades that they did, call it test trades, were done between China and the United Arab Emirates using digital Yuan to purchase gold and oil from the UAE. And I would argue that gold and oil have been remonetized globally, that they are far more valuable than the currencies that are used to purchase them. It's kind of like Iran awarding China a very large contract to remodernize their largest airport, and they're paying for it in oil. It's no different than China buying corn and soybeans in digital yuan through Brazil, who then takes those yuan, sends them back to China, and immediately converts it into gold on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. Gold and oil are taking a different role. Anyways, the four participants that have stood behind or developed Project mBridge are China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates, backed by the Bank of International Settlements. Oops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to knock that. The same bank that has changed their viewpoint on gold, and whether the dynamics have it as a tier one asset or a high quality liquid asset, they look at it very, very, very differently.
Now that you know how China's secretive gold stockpiling and digital yuan strategy could reshape the global economy, the next big move is just around the corner. You won't want to miss the next video where we dive into how these developments might impact the future of your investments and the global financial system. So hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay ahead of the game.